Hey everybody, we're the Epistemologers, and today we are going to talk about rhetoric. And I'm going to share with you guys my favorite story about rhetoric. It's kind of the invention of rhetoric. So Aristotle, this is a story, so who knows, but Aristotle is credited as the father of rhetoric, and he was purportedly really disliked the term and the use of rhetoric, because what he was trying to do was kind of show people tricks and tactics and, things you could do to trick people so that those people wouldn't be tricked. And they could point out the rhetorical errors and say, you're just using this as a thing. So it was made for defense. He was trying to show people that, don't fall victim to these traps. And, of course, the people then took those and used those traps to fool people into doing what they wanted to do. So Aristotle was very disappointed with his students. Anyway, this kind of topic came out of our discussion with Twitter, and we found a lot of rhetorical and logical fallacies that we would like to discuss because, hey, it's good to know how to discuss with somebody and how to deal with people overall. So,
it's good to know what to recognize. There's so many different ways of capturing attention and then diverting it. We always advocate good explanation and the role of good explanation in imparting good understanding. And rhetoric tends to not be that. It has a ton of more coercive effects or fallacies or misconceptions or tricks.
It's all about
to derail from that.
It's all about the art of diverting attention. And
hey, kind of like magic.
Yeah.
Magic. So when I was on, you'll find it a lot on social media, on Twitter. I dove into maybe the wrong crowd not too long ago, where people were debating climate science with a bunch of climate scientists. A lot of them had this take on the science as though everything was as certain as it could be, and since everything was so dire and the world needed saving so badly, that it was so important to them that they need to get the word out, and they started resorting to essentially looking very arrogant. I don't know if they just gave up or they were exhausted because everyone was asking them stupid questions or whatever it was.
They were stupid
but
questions.
It didn't have a good look, we'll just say. So it revealed a very elitist, very pessimistic, very stagnant worldview. And I was able to, in my conversations with them, not really even talk about climate science. Again, I don't really have a position on that. I have some suspicions, but I don't have a position. But I was only able to talk about the philosophy, the philosophical mistakes that they were making. And they don't claim to be experts in philosophy. In fact, they don't like to deal with it. They like to deal with science, which is a philosophical mistake. And they don't realize they're making it because it's philosophy.
Science is philosophy. It's rooted in philosophy. You can't have science without philosophy. We
had a guy saying logic is part of philosophy, climate change is part of science. We're talking about climate science here. So logic is not what we're talking about. I don't know, the implication being we don't need to be logical or something when we're scientists.
Well, science is not logical as his implication, which is why he should study philosophy and logic, because that's literally what the logical conclusion of that is.
Well, logic is going to tell you what's coherent, and it's not worth testing scientifically. It's not coherent. So you'd be wasting your time if you weren't an expert in philosophy as a scientist. You'd be wasting your time.
If you don't have a hypothesis that makes logical sense, right? You're wasting your time. If you can just determine that it's an illogical thing, that there's a logical contradiction somewhere in there, then you don't even need to run an experiment.
Yeah, you got to work it out in your head first. It's got to work there.
Yeah.
Testing, it's really just for information. We want to make sure we have the right idea. And so we go out there into the world and test the expectations we have.
Yeah.
Or that at least the theory makes.
Testing should be to discover unknowns, things that you didn't know that were there. both unknown unknowns and known unknowns, which
you can get remarkably far by just thought experiments and just thinking ahead. We know a lot already. There's a lot of truths we have, and we have a lot of background knowledge that encapsulates a lot of evidence and accounts for it. So we generally are in a good position to come up with theories. We just don't feel compelled to branch out. We don't want to get out on that risky branch and speculate too much. So in the process of talking with these folks, I was besieged by rhetoric. They didn't have any arguments. I was asking for explanations in the philosophical realm. Other people were talking about climate science. I just wanted to know where they stood philosophically, and I realized that they just had a bunch of arguments from authority, and we couldn't even get to the climate science if we couldn't get past the appeals to authority. So I just made a list of all of the different types of rhetoric that I found.
The argument from authority, though, I want to touch on that. That's really important. If you can't agree to terms like, I'm not going to respect whatever degree you have because I rely on your explanation, and just saying you're an expert is not going to convince me, that needs to be a foundation for the whole discussion. Because otherwise, they can just say, well, X, and you have to go with that because they argued that, and they're the authority. You can't really disagree with that unless you're also an authority. And so unless that expectation is set up that you're not going to take an argument from authority as a valid argument, then there's no discussion to be had.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we do get to argument from authority in this list. Mm-hmm. But the list is rather large because they hit everyone with so many different points of rhetoric. It was really hard to categorize. I just wanted to make a list so that people could kind of sort this out. So I'm going to go through relatively quick because people can rewind and listen, but I just going to read through the list. Projection. Claiming you're doing something they're actually doing. 2. Elitism. Derisively looking down on you for whatever reason. 3. Logic fail. Treating even the simplest logical structure is inscrutable. 4. Failure to explain. Claims and charts that aren't coupled with good explanations. 5. Appeals to authority, like we said before, which had 3 subtypes. A government agency's official statement is treated as certain. B. Puffing themselves up to seem important. C. Demands trust merely because one is an expert. Okay, 6. Demands for peer review. I saw this a lot. They're implying that only peer-reviewed papers are valuable. Could be discussed. 7. Peanut gallery, dropping in just to say something disparaging. Got a lot of spectators chiming in. A lot of people would just hit you with likes.
You'll find
the people that
you'll find those that the peanut gallery often is there as a stagnatory thing. People really like watching and feeling good about being right. And I haven't experienced or seen a lot of peanut gallery behavior from progress sort of people. It's really interesting. I don't know why that happens in that way.
Well, they're trying to be careful, and they're holding their shots. They're not firing just willy-nilly. They'll come in when they think they have a point, and it's because they are worried about being wrong, and they want you to be wrong. So they'll try to win. These are all signs of stagnation. Trying to win, trying to put you down, trying to make you look dumb, trying to make you feel bad for having bad ideas, even though that's inevitable. We all have bad ideas.
One of the biggest forms of stagnation is just trying not to be wrong. In trying not to be wrong, we commit many errors and many things that stagnate ourselves and others by trying not to be wrong.
It's amazing how it works.
Yeah.
The complex of self-deception, really. You're trying to feel certain at that point. You're trying to pin down ideas so that they don't change, and that just means you're going to suffer the same errors indefinitely. But we digress. We need to move on. Number 8, ignoring points. They repeatedly ask for answers that you've already delivered. 9, appeal to emotion. They attempt to make you angry just to trip you up so they can find out where you're wrong, because then they get a point, an imaginary internet point. 10, call it error honey badgering. That's what I was referring to. Breathlessly rooting around for errors in what you're saying that is used only to discredit you. They're not actually trying to understand anything. They're not trying to listen. They have their position. They're just trying to shoot you down and make you look not credible. 11. Peer approved. I think I mentioned this before. A gang of peers jumped in to endorse and back up each other.
Oh, yeah, this is a different
They
point.
like
than
to flock
your
in
first one.
packs.
Yeah.
It is a different point. Yeah. They like to flock in packs. So it makes you look like, like you're outnumbered or whatever.
Well, and this is peer review in the sense of you have a bunch of your friends and they all agree, so the one person disagreeing looks a lot smaller than all of your friends agreeing together.
It's emotion.
Yeah.
It's emotion. It's either correct or incorrect.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what the social situation is around that. It doesn't matter at all. It does not even pinned on you. A problem with an idea is just stays with the idea. It has nothing to do with its host. In fact, there are times where you want to entertain a very problematic idea because the benefits of that outweigh the just trying to avoid it. Number 12, snaring. Accuses you of using silence to dodge questions. I don't know what I meant by snaring. Sneering? It's iconic anyway. Okay, 13. Pretend paragon. Claims to practice the virtues you espouse, but just drops them when convenient.
This is that's a big one because I think that it ties into the fundamental belief that you should follow the philosophy you preach, and you find this a lot more often than one would expect. I wouldn't certainly expect people to not follow a philosophy they preach, but it is all over the place. And if you can't follow your own philosophy, why are you trying to put that out there for others to follow? Even if it sounds good, if you can't follow it, you need to reassess where you're at and come up with a better...
It's got to be applicable.
Yeah.
If you're not applying it yourself, it's not constrained enough to put it to practice. 14, demands evidence. Now, it seems like everyone does this. This is actually a stagnation trap because it leads to justificationism. We've gotten into that in other videos.
We have multiple videos on this one.
That's a big deal because it's so common.
It's very common.
People everywhere will demand for evidence. Yes, can I have your evidence? Well, it doesn't lead to certainty because it's just the same. It's just the same process of trying to feel certain about it.
I think the best reason why you shouldn't fall into that trap, or you should say, I'm not going to give you evidence, is because even if you present evidence to a person, they're not going to, like, say you have something that's not necessarily irrefutable, because no evidence is irrefutable, and they'll just refute it. They'll say, that's not real evidence, I want real evidence. That's not evidence enough. And that's how it always works with evidence. You don't have something that proves anything because that's not how science works at all. You can't prove anything. You must constrain things.
You don't prove anything through evidence. You don't derive theory from evidence. If you think you do, you're just stripping creativity out of it.
Yep.
And this is a mistake. And so on. But yeah, we have other videos on evidence. The trap of demanding evidence.
The trap.
15. Expects justification. Treats your running over the logic of an explanation as circular reasoning. Which I found this actually because they're looking for the ultimate justification for why I think the way I do. So they ask questions. Well, I treat questions as a request for actual explanations. But they're actually trying to get to the justification for it, which is a never-ending process of asking questions. And that's not gonna get anything in my. So when I respond, I will just run over the logic of the explanation, and it's like circular reasoning. But it's really just I'm outlining. I'm just shining a light on it. There's no ultimate justification.
Right. I'm
not trying to find it. They shouldn't either. But when they try to interpret what I'm doing as sort of a search for this ultimate justification, we end up not having it. They complain.
Well,
which is very interesting.
This stems from justified true belief, and even though justified true belief has so many problems with it, I guess scientists don't really understand their philosophy. I don't know.
It's completely false. Yeah. Number 16. Humor Nazis. I sprinkle in humor. And they treated well-meaning attempts at lightening up the conversation as not taking it seriously, or they take offense or something. It's really difficult when they're just being very grumpy.
Yeah, humor is an important thing. You know, to have some humor is an important way of spreading your meme, right? You can have climate change.
You want to be approachable.
Yeah. If you're too serious,
you want to be approachable.
I mean, imagine
if you're too gloom and doom and like pessimistic and everything's terrible and you guys are so ignorant and you don't know everything I do and I'm so much better than you.
And the
How
world's
is this
going to end.
Going to help your message?
Yeah.
The world's going to end because they can't get their message past their ego.
Yeah. So if they really believe the world is going to end and they're willing to commit such fallacies, why are they not trying to understand how to better communicate with people? That seems to be the problem.
Everyone else sees the mistakes they're making.
Yeah.
They're like, these are obvious fallacies, and you're supposed to be some kind of science authority on what I should believe. Well, I can't get past these things.
Yeah.
So to even talk about the thing that you're an expert in, number 17, unexamined philosophy. They uncritically carry the same underlying bad philosophy as their peers. They just absorb it and spit it out without examining it because in their mind, philosophy has no role in science.
Even though...
Which is completely mistaken.
Well, I mean, philosophy has a role in everything. To say that it has no role in anything, right. Philosophy is how to think
how we make
clearly.
Sense of the world.
Yeah.
Logic is a part of philosophy.
Yeah.
All of these things have a branch of philosophy, so from science to ethics to aesthetics. All these are different branches of philosophy.
I mean,
how can you even think about anything without this overlap between all these concepts?
I mean, originally, science was just called natural philosophy. If you were a scientist, you were a natural philosopher. What?
Yeah. Not too long ago.
Not too long ago.
Years ago.
Not too long ago.
Or less. 18. Can't complain. Your resistance to the mistakes listed here is being called anti-science or in denial. I was really not talking about climate science. I was just talking about the philosophy. But because I was criticizing their philosophy, just really the delivery of the message. They thought I was aiding and abetting the denialists. Quote unquote, they literally called them denialists, which is fine to say denier, or like you're being a science denier or something, but denialist was fine.
Well, the best part about it sounds like they're calling you a heretic. And I've recently learned that it actually happened in climate science that that scientists actually denounced other scientists as heretics. And that kind of leaves me scratching my head.
They'll ostracize, excommunicate climate scientists that suddenly don't agree with them. They realize they're doing the philosophy wrong. What are you guys doing?
What kind of scientist would label another scientist as a heretic? As another person as a heretic? A priest would do that. Or a old school inquisitor like from the Middle Ages. But I don't think anyone who has the gall to label another person a heretic, as in they have heretical beliefs, should be called a scientist. I think they're unworthy of that title.
Well, really, they just started wearing the same hat the church had back before the Western Enlightenment.
Yeah. Well.
Science they were out to figure out what was really going on in the world around them, and they were at odds with the official decree by the church.
Yep.
And so there was a little rebellion of thought, and eventually science kind of established an ongoing
it became the church?
Peace treaty, I think. Well, it ended up being captured, and the establishment started using the same cult template that they had for religion, and then so all the same concepts are preserved. It just is in science clothing, which is crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Number 19. Woe is me. Complains that people don't believe or trust them, and they call that abuse. They went through all this work, a lifetime of work and research, and being approved by their peers and being cited. and no one believes me. All these ignorant people.
Well, all their peers believe them. Don't worry about that.
I think this is a kind of a slow emotion.
Yeah, it is. But
and you feel it. You feel it. You feel bad at the time. But it's just rhetoric.
It's an appeal to...
Okay, it might be more than rhetoric.
Emotion.
But it's certainly rhetoric.
And authority, because you can conceive of a scenario of an authority or somebody who understands the situation but is unable to communicate it. However, they need to get better at communication. And if there's so many scientists that all follow this understanding that this is happening, they should, at least some of them, should be able to communicate effectively and well what the actual problems are. Instead, we have a lot of philosophical problems with, and even just system-wide problems with how climate science works. The models of climate science are not simple. And when you have complex models, they are prone
non-trivial.
They are prone to error. The more complex your model, the more prone to error it is.
Lots of error.
Lots of error.
Yeah.
And
so this drive for certainty. Yeah, what you're gonna say?
And we design systems for a living. This is not a trivial thing. You can't just say, "Oh, we have this model." That doesn't work if the model is insanely complex, and it is.
Yeah, the more complex it is, the more opportunity for error. Error is inevitable, especially in big systems like this. And so when they're pushing certainty in defiance of that, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. We know otherwise. And really, there is debate. They're just squashing it. Mm-hmm. There's debate. But they don't want you to hear about it. It's all rhetoric. They're pushing certainty as a way to convince people. It's a trick.
Yeah.
20, demands knowledge proof. They want to know how much you know. Will not discuss anything with you unless you pass their tests of knowledge.
The knowledge proof.
Those tests are according to their rules, of course.
Yep.
I saw this, scientists would come in, they're asking questions, and ostensibly it could look like they're trying to understand your view. Never is like that. It's really just a trip, see where you trip.
Yep.
And then so they can point at it. And that's easy for someone who is an expert. Like they do know. They do know their stuff. And that wasn't my argument. The argument is really all this other stuff about delivery and certainty and stuff that doesn't make sense. I had one of them demand that you read all the available material before you can come to the table and talk to them as equals.
Yeah.
Really crazy. They should be very inviting. They should be opening their arms and taking everybody, no matter how ignorant, childish, or illiterate everyone is. Well, because we all have our moments.
Because otherwise, their point about it being world-endingly bad, about they think that the end of the world is going to happen because of this, is moot. If they're not willing to come to the table because somebody seems less smart or less capable of understanding, then what are they doing here? Shouldn't they be trying to get their message out, even to the smallest minded people? And I hate that terminology. That's such elitism. But shouldn't they be trying to dumb down their language or make it more digestible to people who don't understand what's going on? It seems odd that you expect us to just swallow whatever you shit out and
just absorb it.
Yeah, just absorb it. And on Twitter especially, because you can put you have a PhD on Twitter. I can put I have a PhD. I don't. I can put it on Twitter.
You can have a fancy professional photograph.
Yeah, I could have profile. A fancy title
you can lean towards the camera and look.
I can lie on Twitter.
Intellectual.
I don't have to to say that I'm this. I have a Bachelor of Science. I don't have to say that. I can say I have a PhD of climatology and also a PhD in math and philosophy. I can say that. It doesn't mean anything. And so they gotta show that they have a good understanding of the material that they're presenting by being able to explain it to people who don't understand it. That's the whole
and
point.
Not by passing quizzes.
Yeah.
You don't get there. I don't understand your knowledge because you happen to pass a little test of knowledge that I happen to know, right? Because I'm looking for particular answers, and if you don't give me the exact answer, it's up to me if you get a point or not. This doesn't work. No. We judge knowledge by how well you can explain it. If you really understand the material, you can dumb it down to anybody.
Yep.
Now we're software engineers. We deal with complexity all the time. And I design software at my best if I dumb myself down.
And we deal with
people.
If I
get this dead simple explanation.
And we deal with people who do not understand what we're doing at all. Right? We have to deal with people who are in the business end of things, and they have no idea about our program. They might have an inkling, and over time, people generally get a better understanding because we have to explain it to them, and they understand it, and then they get a better understanding of what's going on. This is the process. You can't expect
cross-disciplinary communication.
Yeah, you should be able.
Is really awesome. Sculpting pressure on your explanations.
Yeah.
Because if you have to explain to someone who is not an expert in what you have to explain, you really have to change your words to get the right idea. It doesn't need to be extremely detailed.
No.
Not like we would expect in an academic setting.
No.
It just needs to be good enough to explain the concept at hand.
And you can do it. So people can generally get a good idea of what's going on from an explanation. Now, are they going to be able to implement that thing or have such a full understanding that they can, give it back to you in a way that is accurate and academic and precise? Probably not. But they should be able to understand the concepts well enough.
Right. I just have 2 more points. I know this video is running long, but it's 21. Block party. Rage quit by blocking you. In this case, they're using the Twitter blocking system as a way to put pressure on you because you don't necessarily want to end communication with them.
Well,
you want to hear what they have to say sometimes.
Maybe you do. Maybe if they block you, you don't really care.
Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Yeah, it's hard to care when they block you, but yeah. They'll take the exit when they can quit when they're ahead, as long as they feel like they're ahead. Sometimes they'll get just super angry and then they'll just leave because they think they can pin it on you, like you're just dumb or something, and I don't want to deal with you. That's the attitude when they leave. 22. Appeal to fear. Didn't you know the world needs saving? Didn't you know? And maybe it does.
Yep.
Maybe it does. But it's certainly hard to understand that fact if you don't get your philosophy straight and if you don't explain your expertise well. If you don't explain your expertise well and you still know your stuff, then that means you got some kind of external pressure to not explain well. Like maybe there's an agenda. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's money involved. Or maybe you're just trying to protect your livelihood because if everyone's an expert, you're not an expert.
Yep.
That gets to be a problem.
Yeah.
So there's a conflict of interest.
Or if you're wrong.
Huge conflict of interest.
You
could be wrong.
Yep.
But I'm assuming they know their stuff. Just because I don't like to assume that. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
But they might be wrong. But yeah, good explanation is going to expose all of that. It doesn't matter. You can cut through it because you can demand a good explanation and you can recognize one if they give you one. And you can recognize when it isn't one.
Yep.
And I recognized that they're not giving them. So we should hold them all to a higher standard.
Yeah,
their job they're as scientists is to explain the world.
Yeah.
And they're keeping that explanation amongst their peers. For what reason?
Yeah, why?
For what good does that help? Knowledge doesn't do well in isolation. We don't want to sequester this.
And if it is as they say, and it is the end of the world, this is world-ending stuff, why are they unwilling to share it beyond, I am an authority, the world is going to end? I can go down to my local doomsayer and get that explanation about some giant Godzilla-like creature coming out of the ocean, if and use him as my authority for the end of the world. I can do that. I want my scientists to be able to explain why doomsday is happening in a way that I can understand.
Oh man, did you know doomsday is happening and it's either an asteroid, or it is a superbug,
Yep.
or it's an alien invasion.
Or it's the climate
Did you know?
changing until we can no longer live on the planet.
Oh yeah, it's going to boil our blood.
Yep.
Eventually, we'll all just
Or
overheat and die.
or the ozone is being depleted.
What was us?
Or Africanized
fault,
bees. Don't forget the Africanized bees. That's my favorite one.
Ooh.
Yeah. They're all
And it might all be true. Who knows? I mean, we live in a dangerous world. There's risks everywhere. Of course, we just need to explain that fact one way or another. I want to have some reasons behind my fear. I don't want to just like be thrown around by my emotion. So that's the purpose of this video.
Yep. All right. Is that all of them?
Yeah, we're done with that list.
All right.
It's so long. But
Well, comment on the list if you get so inclined. Leave a like and subscribe and hit the little bell thing. And we'll see you next time.